Welcome everybody to part 4 of our Indie Dev Spotlight recap for the month of February 2020. As always, all the games shown were played on press keys submitted by developers, and we're always looking for new games to showcase, whether they are out, coming, or even in the early alpha, beta, or prototype stage. And we are beginning with another run at the idle genre. This is Idle Warrior. And we were kind of interested in this game looking at on our Sunday show when we saw kind of the interesting pixel graphics. But unfortunately, the game definitely lacks in terms of presentation. And if you're going to do an idle game today, you need to have some kind of presentation. Because, as we all know, this kind of stuff is not the best or not the most exciting thing to watch. And we've seen games such as the Idle Dungeons & Dragons game, Clicker Heroes, I was trying to play a game called Grim Clicker as well, that all do things to make the actual screenplay or the actual aesthetics look decent or look engaging by the fact, or even though we are just clicking on things to make numbers go up to make other numbers go down. As an idle game, or as the idle design itself, Idle Warrior isn't that bad. It has all the same hooks. You're trying to figure out the best ways to min and max your various purchases, see what things you need to upgrade. There are pets and unlocks and all manner of interesting things you can do. But it definitely doesn't feel like the next big thing of the idle genre. And another really good one would be Realm Grinder, if you have not played that. And unfortunately, unless you are starving for idle games, I don't think there's enough of a hook here, unless you are a absolute hardcore fan of the idle genre. The other games mentioned have more appeasing elements that can kind of attract newcomers into it. But with that, let's move on to our next game. And we turn to Necronator Dead Wrong. This is an early access game that is kind of like a quasi tower defense CCG game. And my description of that may be more exciting than what this game actually is at the moment. The idea is that we are playing as the bad guys, trying to look for, I think it was called the Unholy Grail. And standing in our way are all those nasty humans who want to stop us. So the general gameplay is that each map requires you to take out all the enemy towns using your minions. All your special abilities, minions, and powers are designated as the cards that you see at the bottom of the screen. Now, as you play, or as time goes on, you'll gain mana, which in turn will be used to cast these cards. And you have no direct control over your units, other than being able to change their pathing if the map allows you to do it. And that is essentially it for the game right now. The main form of progression is that as you play the game, you'll be able to unlock additional features that can show up in subsequent runs, and as you complete maps, you'll be able to spend additional resources to gain upgrades in the form of either new cards that you can play, artifacts that provide passive benefits, or upgrade your cards. Now, the upgrading system is interesting by the fact that you can choose between one of two upgrades for your minions. And how it works is that you'll have to decide between sometimes either lowering the cost of the card, maybe giving them a special function, more armor, and it's just I think a better way of allowing for these upgrades as opposed to just a flat, make this card automatically all the way around better. It's something I also liked from the game Dreadlands from Clay Entertainment. And Necronator at like the basic level, or the core gameplay loop, is a decent game, but from the version that we played on stream, it's definitely missing that next turn, or that kind of long haul experience. That it started to feel like every map began to play the same way. Yes, I'm gaining more power in terms of cards and artifacts, but because my interaction is so limited, it makes it that none of that is really changing the gameplay. And this is one of those titles that once you figure out kind of like your best strategy, given the cards you have, that's basically it. You can kind of repeat that on every map due to the limited elements of the gameplay, and chances are you're on a good way of winning. And at the moment, like I said, there doesn't seem to be anything that's keeping me interested in playing this game. If you're looking for another CCG-esque roguelike, there are better examples, unfortunately, out there. And I do hope that we see kind of more depth added to this one to kind of flesh out these systems more, no pun intended with my army of skeletons. But with that, let's move on. And we now turn to the game Bloodlust 2 Nemesis. This is a title that appears to really want to be the next Vampire the Masquerade kind of experience, while also being almost like a pseudo MMO in terms of multiplayer and just like the general gameplay loop itself. But unfortunately, as we've said before, presentation certainly matters, especially in today's market, and from what I've seen, it's definitely lacking in that area to onboard and bring new players in. You awaken after a very basic character creation system to a world where you are trying to stop an evil corporation from messing with the vampires. So it's up to you to run around dungeons, collect loot, and try and figure out what's going on. Combat is entirely real time, and it falls along that more like very basic button mashing kind of style we saw from almost like first generation action MMOs. And the game itself, there's a lot in terms of skills and buying items or buying skills, perks, and new abilities, but this was one of those games that it kind of felt like we're trying to play like a low budget version of something that is a little bit more developed. And I hate to say that about games like this, but again, this is one of those titles that you either have to be all in for, or you're just not really going to enjoy it. And for me, as somebody who's a very big fan of ARPG design, kind of like the very basic presentation and gameplay loop just wasn't doing it for me. And the tutorial is also not the best, with just like paragraphs of text that kind of make your eyes start to glaze over. And like I said, the biggest problem from what we played with this one on stream is from the playability and onboarding aspects of it. And when you can't get that right, it kind of sinks the whole experience. Another problem that we had with the game is that given just how much information it kind of throws at you, it runs into that problem of what should the player be focusing on. And what ended up happening during this play is that at one point I was killing every enemy incredibly easy, there were no issues whatsoever, and then all of a sudden I ran into one enemy and it just demolished me. And this is why playability and onboarding really matters for smaller titles like this. Because even though there aren't other games exactly fulfilling this specific niche right now, there are better and more polished versions of this kind of gameplay loop. And when you get frustrated or when the game doesn't really seem to be catching your eye, it doesn't matter how expansive or how much is there, as most people just aren't going to stick around long enough to see that. And for anyone who played this, let me know what you thought about this one. So I was reading reviews of it, and people said that it did start to feel very repetitive after a long period of time. And with that, let's move on. And we now turn to the game Project Groove. This is a first-person puzzle platformer game, loaded with British humor, and I believe is either on or just finished a Kickstarter campaign. And this is one of those titles that we were starting to get into it, but we were also kind of pushing, I think, the limits of its gameplay. But our story is that we are on a mysterious world looking for resources to help our company and such. And we are aided by our glove that you can see there, as well as a robot that performs various functions. The gist of the gameplay is that we are trying to get around the environment while opening up doors, finding additional resources, and also unlocking new abilities as we go forward. Now, the version that you're seeing here, I think, is based off of the Kickstarter demo, so it's not going to be as, I'm sure it's going to be changed or updated as things go on. But we're basically having to just figure out how to get around the environment and solving the various environmental puzzles. Also, our character tends to break his legs very easily no matter what kind of fall he drops in this game. As you heard right there, the leg cracking. But a few of the issues that the game has is that the general gameplay loop does feel a little bit repetitive, at least from what we saw in the demo. By the end of it, we did unlock a new mechanic that I'll come back to in a minute, but similar to something like Portal, once you figure out kind of the solution for one puzzle, you're essentially just repeating that in just slight variations again and again. The controls did feel adequate, like we didn't have any issues kind of maneuvering our character around, but it kind of felt like the game was missing the motivational progression loop to keep somebody playing. At the end of the demo, we unlock this kind of bubble power that allows you to use these springs to shoot ourselves forward, but the problem is that they're based on realistic physics, and the game makes it very hard to kind of figure out just where you're actually going to end up when you make use of them. There's a ton of collectibles and MacGuffins around, but they didn't seem to really solve or have any purpose to them, which I'm sure in the full game they'll probably be doing something else. But all in all, the prototype, well, it kind of felt like a prototype from what we played, and I would like to see kind of what their intentions are in terms of making this a fully fledged and completed title. But if you are looking for another kind of platforming or puzzle-based game, and you don't mind cracking your legs like that, then this may be a good one to check out. And I'll be curious to see how it develops following its Kickstarter. But with that said, it's time for our quick Patreon supporter and sponsor shout-out break. And when we return, we got a few more indie games left to cover here. And now for a quick shout out to our current Game Wisdom supporters and sponsors. Going forward, all Patreon supporters will get early access to our videos. And if you'd like to continue this discussion on game design, be sure to check out our Discord channel, linked down below. If you're looking for more wisdom about game design, be sure to check out my latest offering of books, 20 Essential Games to Study, aimed for first-time developers and students looking for some inspiration for their upcoming games, and Game Design Deep Dive Platformers if you're interested in anything regarding 2D and 3D platforming design. They're both available in print, digital, and wherever books are being sold. For our next game, we turn to Half Past Fate by Serenity Forge, and is as they're describing it, almost like a rom-com meets kind of time travel-ish kind of story. Our young adults here are trying to find their way around life, find love and all that, and we're kind of along for the ride. The key twist of the game is that each chapter takes place in a different time period. So one game may take place in the present day, next chapter is 30 days in the past, the next one 15 years in the past. And I gotta say, I love the pixel graphic or the pixel art for this game. Very clean look, and I just like kind of like the detail of the character models in it. But from what we played on stream, this is very much in the kind of visual novel territory. So if you're hoping for complicated puzzles or interesting gameplay, you're not going to find that here. Also, I'm pretty sure that this game may be subliminal marketing for tea, as the first 2 chapters of the game had to do with a lot of buying of tea, figuring out the right kinds of tea to buy, and I'm not sure what's going on there. There may be a twist, and maybe the bad guy of this game is an evil soda company, but I may be reading too much into it there. Unfortunately, again, when it comes to these streams, visual novel or story-focused games aren't exactly the best when it comes to spotlighting them in terms of their mechanics and design. But if you are looking for another novel-style game, and especially one with some really great aesthetics to it, then definitely give this one a check. But other than that, unfortunately, there's not much more I can talk about unless we want to have an entire discussion about the right kind of tea to buy. And with that, let's go on to our next game. And we now turn to the game that kind of took over, I guess, as the latest of Brocat the Bee game here. This is Shuriken and Aliens. And from the very first moment the gameplay started, I could already tell this is going to be one of those games that is not going to work. The environment kind of looks very basic, and we've been noticing these titles from smaller developers that make these very wide and kind of soulless looking areas. But the gameplay is that we are a ninja, and we've apparently been kidnapped by aliens, and it's going to be up to us to fight and sneak our way through. And the game throws all manner of crazy powers. We have X-ray vision, we have healing, distraction, throwables, you name it, at the player. And it's one of those games where everything just feels very basic to play. The second you get caught by an enemy, it becomes almost a very basic button masher. And apparently things just kind of break, as you saw right there. And this feels like another one of those meme-esque games here. As you can see with this very riveting and high-stakes gameplay here. But unfortunately, despite how much the people watching wanted me to do a complete playthrough of it, I just found the general playability of the title to be lacking. I'm sure there is an audience for this game out there, but again, for somebody like me with so many games to play, we really don't have, unfortunately, the time to get too far into titles like this. Oh yeah, and you do flips every time, or very often, as you jump around there. Oh, there's another one. So, I'm sure a few people watching this want me to go through this entire game, but unfortunately, I really got tired of it quickly. And there's a magical cat for some strange reason. There's another one that I'm curious, if you did pick this up, what did you think of it? But with that, we are going to wrap up this part of our Spotlight recap. I think we have one, at most 2 more parts left for February with all the indie games we covered. As always, I would like to thank the developers for submitting their games to the Spotlight. Please get in touch if you'd like me to play yours, and come back for daily discussions on game design here, and on Game Wisdom, where some of the art and science of games. Until next time, take care. Thanks for watching the video. If you enjoyed things, be sure to do all the liking and subscribing that the kids are doing these days. Check out our Discord channel link down below, where we hang out and chat game design, and come back later tonight for our regular streamings. But that's it, and tune in for more great content here and on Game Wisdom, where we examine the art and science of games.